The clock tower's scream echoed through Redwood Hollow, a town where justice wore a crown of rust and lies. Beneath its shadow, a judge ruled with an iron gavel and a heart of ice, until a stranger arrived, armed with a leather briefcase and a vendetta older than the courthouse itself. This is the story of a town built on whispers, a battle between corruption and a man who dared to dig up buried bones. Don't miss a single twist. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we unravel the darkness lurking behind the Chamber of Whispers. The clock tower above the Redwood Hollow courthouse struck 3, its rusty gears screeching like a dying animal. Beneath it, the townsfolk hurried past the oak-paneled doors of courtroom number 3, heads bowed as if the building itself might judge them. They called it the Chamber of Whispers, a place where verdicts were carved not from law, but from fear. Elara Voss stood at the courthouse steps, her black robe billowing in the dry Californian wind. At 65, her sharp cheekbones and steel-gray eyes still commanded reverence. A child's balloon escaped from the nearby park, drifted toward her. She plucked it from the air and popped it with a single nail, the snap echoing like a gunshot. The mother clutching. The child's hand froze, then scurried away. "Justice isn't kind," Elara muttered, watching them go. Her words dissolved into the fog that clung to the valley like a shroud. For 20 years she'd shaped Redwood Hollow in her image. Shopkeepers who stocked her favorite brandy, teachers who omitted certain pages from history books, pastors who praised her name in sermons. And the lawyers, especially the lawyers. They arrived bright-eyed, fresh from law school, and wilted under her glare. All except one. Kaelen Rowe stepped off the Greyhound bus, the scent of eucalyptus and diesel filling his lungs. His leather briefcase, scuffed from years of subway commutes in Brooklyn, felt heavier than it had that morning. He glanced at the courthouse, its gabled roof piercing the ashen sky. Same monster, he thought. New cage. Need a hand, son? The driver, a man with a Redwood Hollow high sweatshirt, nodded at Kaelen's suitcase. Inside were court transcripts from 1998, the case that had sent Kaelen's father, a construction worker with a DUI, to prison for manslaughter after a white foreman's testimony. Elara Voss had presided. "Just directions," Kaelen said, his voice rough from disuse. "Main Street." The driver's laugh was bitter. "You're standing on it. Welcome to the town that justice forgot." That evening Kaelen unpacked in a rented cottage on Elm, its walls papered with faded roses. A framed photo of his father, smiling at a Dodgers game, a beer in one hand, sat on the nightstand. He opened his laptop, the glow illuminating the room. A Google alert. Blinked. Elara Voss to oversee controversial land dispute case. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. "You're back," the text read. "Gideon." Kaelen's thumb hovered over the reply. Gideon Moss, the court clerk who'd once sneered at his internship application. Stay predictable, he reminded himself. "Just a small-town lawyer now," he typed. "No threats here." The response came instantly. "She's watching. Play dumb or you'll end up like your old man." Outside, the wind howled. Kaelen opened the oldest file in his briefcase. People vs. Carlos Rowe. The trial transcript was stained with coffee rings, his mother's handwriting in the margins. They twisted his words she'd scrawled. He never touched that man. He flipped to Elara's ruling. The defendant's cultural propensity for aggression. "Bullshit," Kaelen whispered. A floorboard creaked. He turned, but the room was empty. Still, the hairs on his neck rose. Redwood Hollow had eyes everywhere. The next morning, Kaelen entered courtroom number 3, the scent of aged wood and lemon polish thickening the air. Elara's bench loomed like a throne. A young black public defender, Lila Chan, her badge red, was mid-argument, her voice trembling. The defendant clearly acted in self-defense, "Your Honor." The victim had a history of. "Are you lecturing me on history, Miss Chan?" Elara interrupted, her smile like a knife. "In my courtroom we respect precedent. And precedent says a man with your client's background should think twice before raising a hand." The gallery murmured. Lila's face flushed crimson. Kaelen clenched his fists. When the hearing adjourned, he approached her. "That was bullshit," he said. Lila stiffened. "You're new." "Kaelen Rowe. I'm taking over the Martinez case? Good luck." Elara's had her sights on that property since the wildfires. She lowered her voice. Listen, if you're smart, you'll quit before she buries you. Kaelen smiled. I'm not here for the property. That night, he filed his first motion. Request for recusal of Judge Elara Voss on grounds of bias. The clerk's office rejected it by dawn. As Kaelen reread the denial, a news alert popped up. Land developer Damian Holt pledges donation to Redwood Hollow Legal Fund. The photo showed Holt shaking Elara's hand, her smile wide and genuine. Kaelen leaned back, the pieces clicking. The land dispute. The sudden donation. The way Gideon Moss had warned him off. Play dumb, he muttered. Right. The second-floor hallway of Redwood Hollow's courthouse smelled of mildew and old paper. Kaelen lingered by the bulletin board, pretending to study a faded Most Wanted poster while Gideon Moss shuffled past, a stack of files hugged to his chest. The clerk's eyes flicked toward Kaelen, guilty then blank. Kaelen had rehearsed this moment. Act small. Let her underestimate you. He'd taken a pro bono case that morning. A teenager, Miguel Ruiz, arrested for tagging the courthouse wall with "Justice is a lie." The perfect bait. Elara's courtroom was quieter than usual. She leaned forward, fingers steepled. Mr. Rowe, I see you've chosen to defend graffiti. Kaelen swallowed, feigning nerves. Miguel's a good kid, Your Honor. He's just angry. Angry. Her laugh was a dry rasp. The boy sprayed lies on a federal building. Do you know what my father did to vandals in his town? The gallery tensed. Kaelen forced a shaky breath. I'm not here to challenge you. I just want leniency. Elara's gaze sharpened. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd seen through him. Then she waved a hand. Fine. Community service. But if I see that boy near this courthouse again. Thank you, Your Honor. Kaelen bowed his head, hiding his smirk. Got you. Later, in the clerk's office, Gideon cornered him. You're playing a dangerous game, he hissed, glancing at the security camera. She could have thrown the book at that kid. Kaelen shrugged. Maybe I'm just lucky. Gideon's eyes narrowed. You don't know what she's capable of. That land dispute case? Holt's paying her off. If you interfere. A folder thudded onto the desk. Elara stood in the doorway, her presence sucking the air from the room. Mr. Moss, are you mentoring our new colleague? Gideon paled. No, Your Honor. Just discussing procedure. Elara's smile didn't reach her eyes. Good. Because loyalty is everything here. That night, Kaelen met Lila Chun at a diner on the outskirts of town. She slid a flash drive across the table. Holt's donation records. He's funneling money through Elara's pet. Charities. But there's something else. Wait. Kaelen raised a hand. Why are you helping me? Lila stirred her coffee, her voice dropping. My brother's in prison because of her. Armed robbery. The security footage mysteriously vanished. Now Holt's building a pipeline on that land. Kaelen pocketed the drive. And you want revenge? I want the truth. She leaned closer. But if you're planning to take her down, you need to know, Elara doesn't bend. She breaks people. And she's got friends in D.C. Back at the cottage, Kaelen plugged in the drive. Files loaded slowly, bank transfers, property deeds, a photo of Elara shaking hands with a senator. Then a video file labeled Project Purge. The footage was grainy, a hidden camera angle. Elara stood at a podium addressing a shadowy group. The weak cling to fairness, she declared. But the strong shape the rules. This town will burn before I let sentimentality corrupt it. Kaelen's blood ran cold. She's not just corrupt. She's delusional. A knock at the door made him jump. Through the peephole he saw Gideon, clutching a manila envelope. Open up, Gideon whispered. It's about Elara. And about me. Gideon's envelope contained a single Polaroid. A young Elara, her face unlined, stood beside a boy in a Little League uniform, dark hair, Moss's sharp jawline. The date stamp read 1998. Kaelen's throat tightened. Your son. My mistake. Gideon's voice cracked. Elara paid for his cancer treatment. Now he's her leverage. If I cross her, she'll let him die, Kaelen finished. So why risk giving me this? Gideon stared at the photo. Because you're not the only one with a score to settle. That land dispute case? Holt's buying the hospital. If Elara wins, the new owners will cut funding. My son's chemo. His fists clenched. I'll burn this town down first. The next morning, Kaelen filed a motion to subpoena Elara's sealed records from 1998. By noon, FBI agents swarmed the courthouse. Mr. Rowe. Agent Rivera flashed a badge, her tone icy. We're investigating financial irregularities in your Brooklyn cases. You're not under arrest yet. Kaelen hid a smile. Right on schedule. I've been expecting you, but you're wasting your time. Rivera's eyes narrowed. You've got 5 minutes to convince me otherwise. In courtroom number 3, Elara slammed her gavel as Kaelen presented the subpoena. This is harassment. The past should stay buried. Like my father's reputation? Kaelen shot back louder than intended. The gallery murmured. Lila-chan, seated in the back, subtly raised her phone. Elara's smile was venomous. Your father was a drunk who couldn't control his temper. Just like you. Except I have proof. Kaelen slid a folder across the bench. The 1998 trial transcript. The missing witness testimony. And this? He held up Gideon's Polaroid. The room seemed to freeze. Gideon, sitting in the clerk's seat, turned ashen. Elara's mask slipped. For the first time, Kaelen saw fear. At midnight, Lila met Kaelen in the diner parking lot. You played them both, she said, handing him a flash drive. The FBI's digging into Holt's offshore accounts. Elara's scrambling to cover her tracks. Kaelen plugged it into his laptop. A video loaded. Elara in a hospital room, gripping the hand of a teenage boy hooked to IVs. Gideon's son. Justice is a transaction, Lila said softly. But you already knew that. The next day, Rivera cornered Kaelen outside the courthouse. Holt's clean. But we found a money trail leading to Elara's charity fund. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Kaelen shrugged. Ask Gideon Moss. He's been talkative lately. As Rivera left, Kaelen noticed Gideon watching from a window. The clerk's face was unreadable, but his hand pressed against the glass, like a prisoner reaching for freedom. That night, Elara's voice echoed through the empty courtroom. The weak cling to fairness. Kaelen hit pause on the Project Purge video. He'd leaked it to Lila. By dawn, the hashtag burn the chamber trended nationwide. A text from Gideon. She knows it was me. My son's discharge papers were denied. Kaelen typed back. Trust me. He opened the 1998 case files again. His father's mugshot stared back. Soon he thought. Soon this town will learn what real justice tastes like. Elara hadn't slept in 3 days. The Project Purge video played on loop in her mind, her own voice cold and unhinged, echoing through the dark courtroom. The weak cling to fairness. Now the world heard it. Now they knew. She stood at the window of her chambers, staring at the courthouse square. Protesters chanted below, their signs slashing through the fog. Elara Voss equals corruption. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, rage. How dare they question her? She'd built Redwood Hollow into a sanctuary of order. She'd saved them. A knock. Gideon entered, clutching a stack of subpoenas. His eyes darted to the empty bourbon bottle on her desk. Your Honor, the FBI. Our pawns, she snapped. Like everyone else. You think I don't know Rowe orchestrated this? That boy's been digging since he arrived. Gideon flinched. There's more. The hospital board denied my son's discharge. They're using him to. To what? Control you. Elara laughed, the sound brittle. You've always been weak, Gideon. Just like your moth. She froze. Gideon's face went white. Don't say it. Just like your mother, she finished softer now. The woman who ran when she realized what you were. A mistake. Gideon slammed the subpoenas onto her desk. I'm not your shame to bury anymore. The next morning, courtroom number 3 was packed. Lila-chan had leaked the hospital records. Gideon's son, terminal cancer, treatment contingent on Elara's favor. The gallery buzzed. Elara's gavel shattered the noise. Order. This court will not be held hostage by the truth. Kaelen interrupted, rising. Your Honor, I move to recuse you again, given your personal investments in this case. Elara's eyes burned. You think you're clever? This town needs me. Without me it's chaos. Or justice, Kaelen shot back. The kind that doesn't trade lives for loyalty. Elara stood. her voice trembling with fury. Justice is for the strong. The weak get crushed. Lila Chen's voice rang out. She held up her phone recording. Like my brother? Like Gideon's son. The room erupted. Elara lunged forward, her robe billowing, and Gideon stepped into the light. Enough. His voice cracked. She's my mother. Silence. Elara staggered back, her mask crumbling. Gideon, no. You're not a queen, he whispered. You're a monster. And I'm done feeding you. That night, FBI agents surrounded Elara's home. Kaelen watched from the shadows as they hauled her away, her screams piercing the fog. But as the squad cars pulled out, a black SUV idled at the edge of the forest. Damien Holt stepped out, smiling at Kaelen. Congratulations, he said. You killed the king. Now the real game begins. The new gavel struck at dawn. Damien Holt, Redwood Hollow's first black judge in decades, sat atop the bench of courtroom number 3. His smile was warm, his tone measured. Let's begin anew, shall we? The gallery clapped, politicians, reporters, townsfolk clutching Reform Now pins. Kaelen stood at the back, Lila's flash drive burning in his pocket. New robe, same rot. Elara's mugshot had made national news. Disheveled lips peeled back in a snarl. But her voice still haunted the courthouse halls. You think this changes anything? Gideon had whispered it to Kaelen during her arraignment. She's just one spoke in the wheel. Now Gideon sat in the clerk's seat, hollow-eyed. His son's hospital bed had been moved to a private facility, courtesy of Holt's Corporation. After the hearing, Damien invited Kaelen to his chambers. The room reeked of sandalwood and privilege. You've done remarkable work, Damien said, pouring bourbon. But Elara's arrest, it's only the first step. Kaelen sipped, his throat burning. You sound like you knew her. Damien's laugh was smooth. We all wear masks, Mr. Rowe. Even saints. He slid a folder across the desk. Project Purge glared from the tab. Kaelen stiffened. Where'd you get this? Elara's allies are my allies. And her enemies. Damien leaned forward, eyes glinting. Well, let's just say I admire a man who plays the long game. That night, Kaelen met Lila at the diner. She slid him a dossier, Holt's offshore accounts, linked to Elara's charity. He's not cleaning up the town, she said. He's buying it. Kaelen opened the folder Damien had given him. Inside was a photo of his father, alive, smiling, standing beside a young Damien in a Harvard sweatshirt. Your dad knew the truth, Lila murmured. That's why they buried him. The next morning, Gideon cornered Kaelen in the courthouse stairwell. Holt's men are watching my son. They say the boy's a example. Kaelen grabbed his arm. What example? But Gideon was gone, swallowed by the fog. In courtroom number 3, Damien presided over a eviction case. The tenant, an elderly black woman, pleaded through tears. This is my home. Damien sighed. The law is clear. Progress waits for no one. As bailiffs dragged her out, Kaelen caught Damien's gaze. The judge winked. That night, Kaelen stood at Redwood Hollow's edge, the courthouse looming like a tombstone. His phone buzzed. A text from Gideon. Run. Then a photo, his father's grave freshly dug. As Damien Holt's smirk faded into the fog, Kaelen Rowe clutched the photo of his father's grave. Freshly dug, a silent warning etched in dirt. But here's the question. Who really holds the shovel now? Stay tuned, because in Redwood Hollow the truth doesn't set you free. It buries you alive.